So we gather on this first Sunday of autumn. The seasons begin to change as we continue on our journey. We are in, obviously, what we call ordinary time still. But the time of ordinariness is what makes us so valuable to one another. It's in the ordinariness of our lives that every day we're asked to be that instrument of peace, as we heard in the opening prayer. Question: where did the church begin? You're out there. Where did the church begin? Brother Peter? No. The day Jesus walked out of the tomb. Okay. What city did the church begin in? Jerusalem. And the first bishop of Jerusalem was Peter. James, the first apostle. James. Right? The church, the Catholic Church, did not begin in Rome. Right? In fact, Rome is one of the parts of the Catholic Church. The first bishop of Jerusalem was James. Okay? And according to what we know, James is referred to as the brother of the Lord. Now, in the Gospel, there are a couple of Jameses that are spoken of. But this particular one, if we really listen and read this epistle, mirrors everything that Jesus taught us. He speaks to us about compassion. He speaks to us about humility. He speaks to us about peace. Now, many people will look at the epistles, the letters, epistle, letter, the same thing, of St. Paul. And then if you read those letters, there's a very different, there's a very different manner of writing. Many of the letters of St. Paul are very, not only instructive, but at times demeaning. Whereas the letter of James isn't that at all. As I said, he really mirrors the words of Christ. And I think that in itself, if you have never, and we don't use this epistle, this letter often enough. But if you want to read something, as they say, completely different from the other letters that we find in the New Testament, take the time and read this letter of James. I think, and I'm not sure, okay, I'm not a biblical scholar, and I don't have a good head for numbers, but I believe it's only 6 chapters. So it isn't a long, difficult thing to do. And what we're asked to do, obviously, is to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. Taking those words of Christ and making them come alive. And they have to come alive within us. As I said at the beginning, sometimes we go through a period of, of questioning. Remember last week in the Gospel we heard a question where Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" And between that section of Mark and today's Gospel, there's that incident we refer to as the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter and James and John, and they hear that this is God's beloved, in whom God is well pleased. And it says they failed to understand these words, they were afraid to question him. Now, when we ask questions, we're not being unfaithful. The only way to get answers to questions is to ask them. When I was in the classroom, I remember always bringing up the idea that the only questions that are stupid are the ones you don't ask. So these men who followed Jesus, who knew him so intimately, didn't ask questions because they were afraid to question. How many of us at times are afraid to question? And questioning usually makes us stronger because it answers whatever we really aren't sure of. Jesus takes a child to show the manner in which we approach God. Takes a child and puts them in the midst of the apostles. And childlike and childish are two terms, two words that are very different. If we're childish, we are selfish, we are immature. But if we're childlike, we're filled with wonder. We're filled with an openness, with an innocence. And as people of faith, this is what we're called to be. Yeah, the questions are there. But the manner in which we listen gives you and me the knowledge of who the Christ is for us. And the innocence of a child. Remember when it was Christmas Eve, and in the morning we would possibly go scurrying around to see what was available in little hidden places. And the wonder of what's going to happen on Christmas morning. Do we have that innocence to believe God's word? It's up to you and me. And if we truly believe that Jesus is Christ, then the questions might be less. The innocence is even better. Because God lives in us, we live in God's presence. So my sisters and brothers, again, the question from last week. Who do people say I am? Do we answer as a child, in a childish way, or in a childlike way? May the answer lead us to God's presence. Pray for me as I pray for you. May God bless us and keep us. May God's face shine upon us and give us peace now and always.